Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the 12th Embodied Cognitive Science Seminar. Today, we are happy to welcome Shogo Tanaka. Shogo Tanaka is a professor of psychology and philosophy at Tokai University here in Japan. He is primarily interested in clarifying the theoretical foundations of psychology from the perspective of embodiment. His research covers a broad range of topics, including body schema, body image, skill acquisition, embodied self, social cognition, theory of mind. And today he'll be talking about intercorporeality and its mediation by online meeting software. Professor Tanaka, thank you for joining us today. The stage is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Tesh, for your kind introduction. And well, okay, and where's Tom? I don't see.
Hello.
Are you there?
Okay. Yes. You cannot see us in the video. Let's just fix the video first because
the video is fixed. Yeah? Maybe it's just a light problem.
No, you cannot see us, or?
Well,
no, we can see you. Maybe we can just zoom in a little bit on you because the first 3 rows are empty. So basically, you're very small.
Okay.
But yeah. No problem. I can hear you. Okay, so thank you for inviting me to give a talk here at the seminar. I think there are many researchers who have close interest joining here. Okay, so but this is the first time for me to give a talk here. So just let me introduce myself briefly. And well, as Tesh gave very exact information about me, but please let me repeat a bit that my main research field is phenomenology of embodiment, especially that of Maurice Merleau-Ponty and Edmund Husserl. And I am working in both fields of psychology and philosophy, but my main work is to develop the perspective of the so-called embodied mind, the paradigm of embodied mind in psychological issues such as perception or skill learning or social cognition and the self. So, and here I put one of my recent publications that I published last year. I co-edited a book with my colleagues. One is Yohai Ataria from Tel Hai in Israel, and another one is Sean Gallagher from Memphis in US. We published a book which focuses on body schema and body image. And well, we tried to give a very clear theoretical distinction between body schema and body image. And I myself contributed a chapter which focuses on the interrelationship between body schema and body image in the process of motor learning. Well, one of our aim is to give very clear distinction between BS and BI because both notions are very much confused in diverse fields like neuroscience or rehabilitation or psychology or philosophy. So we hope to give a very clear distinction and try to understand the relationship between them. Well, okay, so, but my today's talk is going to have a focus on intercorporeality. And my talk is titled Intercorporeality, Mediated by Online Meeting Software. Well, as all of you have many experiences with online meeting software, that the current COVID pandemic has rapidly increased our opportunity to use this kind of online meeting software like Zoom, as we are using now, or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams. And probably most of you or all of you have a kind of different feelings or sensations when you use online meeting software, well, being compared to face-to-face conversation. Well, and I'd like to focus on the difference of intersubjective experiences between online and face-to-face conversation in terms of Merleau-Ponty's idea of intercorporeality, okay? So here is the outline of my talk. Well, first of all, I'd like to revisit the Merleau-Ponty's notion of intercorporeality. Well, many of you may be familiar with this notion, but I would like to focus on the notion in, within the context of social cognition of current cognitive science. Well, and then I'd like to expand the notion in the field of social psychology, which focuses on interpersonal communication and interpersonal coordination. And I'd like to introduce two related concepts. One is behavior matching, and the other one is interaction synchrony. And then after that, I'd like to confirm the idea of inactive intersubjectivity, which was originally proposed by Thomas Fuchs and Hanne de Jager. And then after explaining all the theoretical stuff, I'd like to introduce my own research, which is based on observation, comparative observation of both cases of face-to-face conversation and online conversation. And after showing the result, I'd like to add some discussion on this. Okay, so let me start. Well, first of all, I'd like to confirm the very idea of intercorporeality, which was originally proposed by Merleau-Ponty. And well, and in explaining what the intercorporeality is, I would like to emphasize that there lies the philosophical problem of other minds, that how we can know other person's mental states in the background to this notion. Well, for example, within the same context, he proposed intercorporeality. He claims that, quote, "We must abandon the fundamental prejudice according to which the psyche is that which is accessible only to myself and cannot be seen from outside." Well, this is a quotation from his lecture note titled "The Child's Relations with Others." Well, from this quotation, we can know that Merleau-Ponty did not regard the mind as something enclosed within one's own body and unperceivable from outside. So this was the very basic idea that he tried to propose the notion of intercorporeality. And as you may know, his idea resonates very well with the ground problem pointed out in the context of current social cognition. Probably most of you may know the theory of the so-called theory of mind debate. That well, I'm not going to go into the depth of the debate, but I just I would like to summarize in the following way that there are two camps. One is called theory, that we use our capacity of folk psychological theory in understanding another person's mental states. The folk psychological theory is applicable both oneself to the other. So this is a kind of theory which emphasizes an objective view, which is based on third-person perspective. And another camp is simulation, so-called simulation theory, which emphasizes our subjective in a simulation process in understanding another person's mental states, that we can use our own mind as a kind of simulation in understanding another person's mental states. So simulation theory emphasizes a kind of subjective point of view based on first-person perspective. But what I would like to emphasize is that both camps, both theories share a kind of hidden and common presupposition that another person's mind is hidden behind the body. And probably this is the reason that higher cognitive processes such as theoretical inferences or inner simulations are needed, because there is, according to their understanding, there is a kind of epistemic gulf between one's mind and another person's mind. Well, and from the perspective of Merleau-Ponty, he rejects this hidden presupposition itself. Well, here the core idea of his intercorporeality. Well, he himself, let me quote another passages from his phenomenological perception that, well, he himself observing a baby's behavior, he described that a 15-month-old baby opens his mouth when I playfully take one of his fingers in my mouth and pretend to bite it. He perceives his intentions in his body, perceives my body with his own, and thereby perceives my intentions in his body. Well, probably looking at this picture, you can have a very similar scene to this passage that there is a caregiver who is trying to feed a baby, and probably she has an intention of opening the mouth of the baby, and she opened the mouth, giving a food to the baby, and the baby is resonating through her body that opened the mouth. So probably she is practicing the perceived intention of opening a mouth of the caregiver. Well, from this passage, we can know that the very basic structure of intercorporeality, that one perceives, when one perceives the other's action, at once one grasps the other's intention and resonates that action. Here I just emphasized at once in the sense that at the sensory motor level, without being mediated by any mental representation, one can grasp the other's intention included in one's own action, in one's action, right? So the very important structure of intercorporeality, we can find a kind of perception and action loop between one's body and another person's body. Well, the first phase is I perceive the other's action, and it prompts the same action in the self's body. Like when I perceive a very innocent smile of a child, that it prompts me to smile back. Well, this is the first phase, and the second phase is a kind of reciprocal loop that the other perceives my action, like yawn, like my yawning, and it prompts the same action in the other's body. So this is a kind of perception action loop between one's own body and that of the other. Here, the structure of intercorporeality. Well, and Merleau-Ponty emphasizes very much this kind of intercorporeal relationship between self and other at the very basis of our social understanding or social perception. So the starting point of social understanding from Merleau-Ponty perspective is that in perceiving the other's action and the intention included in it. So as the social understanding is action-based, the subsequent phase of social understanding is also actualized through respondent actions toward the previous ones. So we can say that the most basic dimension of social understanding proceeds in the form of action and reaction loop. Well, I put two examples here. That one is pair who are dancing by meshing their steps with each other, right? And this is another example that this is a scene of Japanese mochi making. Mochi is normally made by a pair, and one person pounds the mochi very, very forcefully, and the partner, well, every time the partner pounds the mochi, the other one tries to adjust the shape. And the secret of making mochi is to keep the good rhythm and to mesh with each other their action. Well, so, okay, and expanding this kind of action-reaction loop into the field of social psychology, we can refer to two related concepts. One is behavior matching, and another one is interaction synchrony. And both ideas are very well defined by Bernieri and Rosenthal's 1991 paper. And both concepts define to analyze certain types of phenomena in interpersonal communications, which basically endorse I think, basically endorse intercorporeality. The first one, behavior matching, refers to the scenes in which more than two people show a similarity in nonverbal behaviors, such as facial expressions or bodily actions and postures. Well, in the field of developmental psychology, we can refer to one example as known as neonatal imitation, which was reported by Meltzer and Moore. Okay, and another one is interactional synchrony. This refers to the scenes in which the participants' embodied interactions are smoothly and coordinated, well meshed in their timing. So the similarity is not the point here, that their embodied interactions are very well meshed, like two person in dancing, who are dancing. That there is another example from developmental psychology that the synchrony phenomena reported by Condon and Sander in their classic paper, that even an infant of 2 weeks, newborn infants of 2 weeks can synchronize their movement of head and hands and legs to the adults who are talking around them. So they are trying to synchronize their bodily movements to the utterances and the voice of the voice that are hearing around their body. Okay, so we can say that our most fundamental experience of intersubjectivity is given through matching and synchrony of embodied interactions, and most of them are very well nonverbal, practiced in the nonverbal dimension. So probably music ensemble is a kind of another typical example for our social understanding. Well, and a notion of enacted intersubjectivity in their 2009 paper, that their basic idea is that interpersonal coordination practiced through embodied interactions forms the intersubjective experiences shared by the communication partners. And they point out that the experience of common sense making emerged through such interpersonal coordination. Well, let me quote a very impressive part of their paper. They say that when two individuals interact in this way, the coordination of their body movements, utterances, gestures, gazes, etc., can gain such momentum that it overrides the individual intentions and common sense making emerges. The in-between becomes the source of the operative intentionality of both partners, and each of them behaves and experiences differently from how they would do outside of the process, and meaning is co-created in a way not necessarily attributable to either of them. Well, so, when we match and mesh our embodied interactions very well, the in-between of the participants becomes the source, the very source of meaningful experiences of intersubjectivity. This is the core idea of them. Well, okay, on the basis, based on these theoretical, mainly embodied understanding on intersubjectivity, I carried out a kind of observational study to explicate the qualitative differences between face-to-face and online conversation. And this is a work in progress still, and I have just carried out one case study now, but I'd like to share the result of my study. Okay. Well, and let me roughly explain the procedures of my observational study. First of all, I collected 2 video recorded conversations. One is face-to-face condition, and another one is online condition. In each one, 3 people participated in the conversation, and I recorded 20 minutes of free conversation of each from the start. And as you can see on these figures, in face-to-face condition, 3 participants used a same table using two sides and keeping their normal personal distance, like 50 centimeters. In online condition, 3 participants used Zoom for in a gallery mode, so that each person would be shown in the monitor as the same size. Well, okay, and after recording the video, I analyzed. I observed and analyzed what kind of behavior matching and interaction synchrony could be confirmed. Well, and here is the result that, well, about the face-related behavior matching was almost the same in case of face-to-face and online condition, that in both cases, I could confirm face-related matching like smiling or nodding at the same time, well, in both conditions. But there were 3 types of behavior matching that I only could confirm in face-to-face condition. One is eye-related matchings, that there are 2, that one is eye contact, well, two participants are looking at one another, or other one is joint visual attention, that more than 2 people are looking at the same object. And the second one is hand and arm movement, that 2 people are showing the same way of clasping hands or folded arms. And the third one is the posture, especially the case of the listeners, that 2 listeners were leaning back at the same time, or 2 listeners were turning the body to the speaker when the speaker starts to utter. And it was very interesting that I could confirm very unique behavior matching in online condition, that more than 2 people were saying the same words like wow or great. Well, in Japanese, I confirmed that wa or sugoi. Two people were saying at the same time. And so it was very interesting because this is half verbal and half non-verbal. So, well, in normal cases of face-to-face condition, we can only observe behavior matching in non-verbal manner, but in online condition, we can observe a kind of half verbal behavior matchings. It was very interesting. Okay, and this is the result on interaction synchrony, that, well, in synchrony as well, in face-to-face and online conditions, we could confirm the face-related same patterns of synchrony, that the speaker starts to utter and the listener starts to smile, or the speaker starts to utter and the listener starts to nod. These were common in both conditions. But in face-to-face, there were 2 patterns which were particular in face-to-face condition. One was eye response, that the speaker starts to utter and the listener starts to look at the speaker, or the speaker starts to point at something and the listener look at the object. And the speaker turned the body, well, to a certain direction, and the listener starts to look at the speaker. And another one is hand and arm movements, that this is almost unconscious, that someone of the participants start to scratch the hand, and another one starts to touch the face like this, or someone starts to clasp the hands on a table, and the other one starts to fold the arms. But they are very well meshed in their timing of nonverbal behaviors. Well, and in online condition, I could confirm only these patterns that all synchronies are basically induced by the speaker's utterance. Speaker starts to utter something, and the listener reply in smile or nod. So this was the only pattern of synchrony that I could confirm in online condition. Well, and these are the differences of patterns in matching and synchrony, and I could confirm the difference of frequency as well. It is very interesting as well that it is notable that the frequency of coordination tends to reduce drastically in online conversation. It was my, well, probably this is the most big reason that we sometimes get frustrated through online meeting software, that please see the total number. Well, in face-to-face condition, I could confirm more than 3 times of matching and synchrony than in online conversation. And please let me explain the numbers in brackets. This means that eye-related matching or eye-gaze related synchrony, that in the case of matching, this means eye contact or joint visual attention, or the synchrony mean that someone starts to utter and the other person starts to look at the person. So, well, so most part of the matching and synchrony, the very big part of matching and synchrony are occupied by eye-gaze related coordination. So one of the reasons that the nonverbal coordination reduces in online conversation is that we are not able to use eye gaze very effectively as we practice normally in face-to-face conversation. Well, so based on these findings, let me add some points of discussion, okay? First one is nonverbal signals. First part is about nonverbal signals, that in face-to-face conversations, gaze-related matching and synchrony seem to play very important roles in structuring a scene. That, well, I found that Charles Goodwin, who is very well known, his research on conversation analysis, he says that the listeners normally convey that they are listening, their intention of listening, by turning their gazes at the speaker. And I try to confirm this by analyzing my video recorded data, that I try to divide the 20 minutes of recorded data into individual scenes according to who was the main speaker. And in the face-to-face condition, I could observe 9 scenes, and 7 out of 9 scenes were, was composed of just one main speaker. But in contrast, in online conversation, 4 scenes, only 4 scenes out of 12 scenes had one main speaker, and the rest had 2 or 3 main speakers. So, well, this is very contrastive. So we can say that in face-to-face conversations, it is very easier for a scene to be structured with one main speaker, because the listeners can show through their eye gaze that they are listening. So the conversation is very easily structured to one main speaker, having one main speaker. In online conversation, in contrast, as synchrony is induced only by voice, as I indicated earlier, multiple people tend to continue the conversation. So the scene is not easily structured into one main speaker. This is the first point. The second point is about difference of the experience of in between in the conversation. Well, in online conversation, the frequency of nonverbal coordination tends to reduce drastically. So embodied interactions are not so highly coordinated that the participants probably experience the inactive intersubjectivity in a kind of weaker manner, or we can say that with lower autonomy. So each participant stays rather independent in online conversation and interacts with one another through utterances. So they tend to become a kind of dialogue or a discussion, having multiple speakers in the same scene. Well, and in contrast, face-to-face conversation involves much more opportunities for nonverbal coordination. So the participants are very well matching and meshing their embodied interactions. So emotional context or social context for mutual understanding is more easily constructed through embodied interactions. Okay, the third point is that relationship with one's own body, especially one's face, as you are experiencing now. In online conversations, the participant's own face is shown on the monitor along with the faces of other participants. So in face-to-face conversations, we experience, in contrast, normally in face-to-face conversations, what we experience is, our faces in a very implicit manner, because we cannot look at our own face like in online conversation. So we experience our faces implicitly, and it is very much affected by diverse emotions shown in the faces of others. So probably kind of unconscious emotional contagions are occurring at every time we talk to other people. But in contrast, monitoring one's own face in online conversation, the participants become more aware, can become more aware of one's own emotional states, which is expressed through their faces. So probably this condition, the difference of this condition would make the participants more explicit in their emotional reactions. And it could be either way, that one is exaggerating their emotional expressions or inhibiting their emotional expressions. Well, so they are the discussion that I wanted to share with you. And let me summarize and conclude my today's talk. Okay, first of all, the most basic aspect of social understanding is underpinned by intercorporeality, which unfolds as an action and reaction loop. Okay, second, the well-meshed embodied interactions between self and others create an autonomous process as a social or emotional context within which mutual understanding is facilitated. Okay, the third point, in conversation processes, nonverbal coordination, which appears as matching and synchrony, constitutes a very important part of the social understanding and forms our intersubjective experiences, which undergoes under the surface. Okay, and four, in face-to-face and online conversations, nonverbal coordination occurs in different manners, as we saw. In online conversation, the coordination which appears as matching or synchrony is less frequent, first of all, and less structured through eye gaze, but involves more reflexive relationship with one's own body or one's own face. So being compared to face-to-face conversations, each participant stays rather more independent and interact one another through utterances. So the conversation tends to turn into a kind of dialogue or a discussion rather than a shared emotional experience. Well, probably most of you may expect this kind of conclusion, but I could confirm really through the, observing embodied interactions on recorded videos of both conditions of conversation. So, okay, just let me finish here, and I'd like to receive questions.